Leica L mount. Let's take a look at the budget options in this mount. It's in the Alliance interchangeable. So if one company makes an L mount lens, you can put it on another company's L mount camera. I'm going to look at the new options and the used options. First on B&H, the cheapest option you're going to start off with is the original S5 from Panasonic. It's going to be contrast detect autofocus. Consider that is that the new version of this camera, the S5 II, has phase detect autofocus. If you can make it work, I'd say go with the newer version. With this camera, $1,300 new, seems like a pretty decent option, especially considering it's full frame. You're going to get amazing image quality out of it. The viewfinder isn't super high resolution, but the magnification's decent. 4K 60 video, 10-bit internal recording. With Panasonic, you can expect video features to be pretty decent, but again, it's contrast-based autofocus. So if you want solo video making stuff with autofocus, I'd say go for the newer version. It does have dual SD card slots. So interesting combination of features, and the price, considering it's a full-frame camera, isn't bad. Of course, that is without a lens. So in this case, we have a 20 to 60 millimeter kit lens for $1,600. Considering the current pricing of the S5 II, I'd say this is going to be your first option if you can find it at that price for $1,700. You're going to have better autofocus system, more consistent autofocus. You're going to have a higher resolution viewfinder. It's a very nice upgrade compared to the previous model. So if you can make it work, try to get the S5 II. The first alternative here, $1,900 for the Sigma FP. This is very niche. It feels overpriced. If you want to do video, maybe consider it, but honestly, probably not a great option, especially new at that price. Used, it's still expensive. And then here we go up to around $2,000 for the video focus version of the S5 II with that X marking on it. You get more video features, not a huge amount. It's a lot of firmware stuff, some additions with live streaming capabilities in the camera. So very interesting for video people, but if you do photography, just go with the regular version. So yeah, the pricing is getting very expensive at this point, $2,000 for the camera, and then you're gonna have to consider a lens. Our first Leica option is the SL2S for $5,195. You're gonna spend a lot to get Leica. I mean, if you want it, go for it, but you're gonna be spending a lot of money here. Used cameras should be more interesting than the new stuff, considering you've only got the S5, S5 II, and maybe the Sigma option. Here's an APS-C older Leica option, currently $610. Let's see what the rating is. Like new minus, not bad. So if you want a Leica camera, you could at least consider something like this. APS-C in this mount is a little confusing, but there are actually APS-C lenses available, and $610 for a Leica, regardless of what it is and how functional it is interesting at the very least. It looks kind of cool. Yeah. Here's the original S5. You can see the pricing here, $1,039, almost $1,100. So like new minus, EX Plus, not bad. This is probably a pretty decent entry-level option to get into L mount. It's going to be a fine photography camera. Again, with the focus system, it's contrast-based, but still it's a full-frame camera, 2 card slots, robust camera body, fully articulating screen, has a viewfinder. Yeah, for $1,000-something. Again, I'd probably try to get the S5 II, but you're going to be spending quite a bit more. Here's the Panasonic Lumix S1. You can see the pricing is very similar to the S5. I think this is an older camera. It looks pretty functional. Obviously, with any Panasonic camera that's a little bit older, it's probably going to be very solid regardless. 24-something megapixel camera. Yeah. So at the very least, you could consider this as well. Scroll down the line here. We've got the S5 II for around $1,600. Getting kind of expensive. Again, I'd probably just get a new one, but you could at least consider the used option if you want. Then we've got the S1R, which is higher resolution, for around $1,700. And the CL, which I believe is an APS-C camera on Leica. So we're not going to get to actual full-frame Leica until around $2,100 or so. The original SL. So again, not a huge amount of options, but pricing honestly isn't terrible in the used, considering what you get in the robustness of Panasonic cameras. So MPB is another used camera option. We've got the Sigma FP and the FPL. Again, these are very video focused and very niche in my opinion, but you can see it drops down to around $1,000. Look at it, see if it's something that is interesting to you. If you want a very, very compact full frame camera just for photos without a viewfinder, maybe that's an option. So yeah, pretty unique, I'll say. Here on MPB, we've got the Panasonic options. So the S5 IIX, which is the video version of that camera, pretty expensive. I'd say just go new in that case. And the S1R is the higher resolution version. Good condition for around 1400. If you want higher resolution, you're going to do, I don't know, landscape photography or something. Maybe consider this out of the other options to get in there into L mount. And then the original S5, around 900 starting point. Not too bad. For around 1600, you could get the original Leica SL on MPV. Maybe consider it at the very least if you really want a Leica branded camera. Taking a look at new options currently on B&H. So we're going to start with APS-C, which is not super functional on this mount. There aren't a lot of APS-C cameras. As far as I can tell, it's 1 or 2 or maybe 3 Leica cameras, which might not even be sold anymore. Not a great option currently on this mount getting these lenses. So I'm actually going to exclude those from the list. As we start off here, we have the Panasonic 50mm f1.8s for currently $350. Now all these pricing numbers are going to be off potentially because it is currently the holidays, so I guess there are a bunch of sales. It shows the savings amount and the current price, so maybe you'll get around either one, but the maximum should be the sale price plus the savings. For the 51.8s, I think that's a great option. Decent normal focal length, aperture, f1.8. Can't complain. It's going to be a very nice lens, and from what I've seen, Panasonic lenses for video people is a very solid option optically, so considering focus breathing and such. There's 85 1.8 for $500 to $600. Again, very nice. The price isn't bad for what you're getting. Good aperture to start off and something good for portraits. Whatever you want to do, that should be nice. Another Panasonic, this is basically a kit lens, 20 to 60, 3.5 to 5.6. I'd probably only get this in a kit. 20 millimeters on full frame is decent, but sometimes you do want wider angle, and it's going to be a trade-off. Sigma 45 f2.8 for $550. Interesting option. It's kind of quirky. It looks relatively compact, so if you want smaller lens options for this mount, maybe consider this. Or it looks kind of geared, so for video and such, doing some type of rig focusing, could consider it maybe. Besides that, I'd probably skip it. 24 3.5 for $550. So if you want a wider angle prime, even though it's f3.5 maximum, kind of quirky and unusual, but it looks relatively compact for what it is on L mount. Pricing is going up fast. I have $570 for a macro lens, probably one of the very few new options in macro, 1:1 magnification. You know, if it's the one option, you have to at least consider it if that's what you want to use and do. Of course, you can also get extension tubes to save money and then use that 50 1.8. 35 1.8 for $600 to $700. Not terrible, but 35s tend to be pretty expensive considering. 17 f4, this is another unique one from Sigma. $600, getting pricey, but 17 on full frame is pretty wide field of view. Interesting at the very least, and it looks compact, so that's kind of cool in a way. Sigma's making some interesting focal length and aperture combinations for L mount. 640 for 90 f2.8. If you want a little bit more range than an 85, I guess you could consider this, but I'd probably go with the 85 1.8 for Panasonic over this. But this does look a bit more compact, so unique at the very least. I think for new options is going to be pretty pricey. There are, again, a few standouts like that 50 for a reasonable price. Now let's look at the used lens options in L mounts. I'm only showing the full frame lenses. So in this case, we've got cheapest thing is the 20 to 60, basically what is a kit lens for a full frame. $300 to start off on KH, and it's Lightning minus. Not too bad, but again, I'd probably try to get this in a kit. Might be around that, but you're going to have a new lens instead of a used lens. Here's the 51.8 for actually pretty close to the new price at the moment. This is very time dependent. Again, the 85 is basically the same situation, just a little bit more expensive. If you want more of a portrait lens, longer focal length, go with the 85 1.8 from Panasonic. Here's a Sigma 85 1.4 Art. So that might be a little bit older. You could at least consider it. 24 1.8. Again, maybe if you want that lens or one like this, go used, save a little bit of money. There's a 51.4 Sigma. I'll probably go with a Panasonic 1.8, honestly, in that case. 70-300 f4.5 to 5.6 with stabilization for $814. So If you want a little bit more range, obviously the aperture range is variable, so that's not ideal. Telephoto lenses tend to be pretty pricey, so you could consider something like this if you want it. Sigma 100 to 400, again, this has got an aperture range that is variable. f6.3, 400. I'd probably go with the Panasonic instead, but you could consider the Sigma here as well if you want the extra 100 millimeters of range. Here's a 16 to 35 f4, 850 to start off. Ultra wide on full frames, pretty good, 60 millimeters, but f4 is decent. It's just not going to give you as many options as like an f2.8 lens. 24 to 105 f4 gets you a little bit more telephoto. Consider that, but the pricing here is just skyrocketing. It's getting very expensive with lenses. Again, it's pretty new that this L-mount alliance has existed, so there just aren't a huge amount of used options, and it's not as well used as a Canon mount or a Sony mount, maybe even Nikon, but they haven't been as popular with mirrorless as Canon and Sony have. So here's a few Leica options used. Last thing we're going to look at is MPB used. MPB's filtering options aren't great. This is probably a manual focus lens. Here's a 20 to 60. Man, their sorting is really bad. This is not a pleasant website to look through. So the cheapest thing here on MPB, 250-ish. Again, try to get this lens in a kit if you really want it. The 20 to 60. Here's an APS-C option. This is probably manual focus. 45 2.8. Maybe consider this one if you can find it used. It's going to be most likely more compact than pretty much anything at this focal length. So maybe the 45 2.8 could be a nice, relatively compact option for L-mount if you want to find it. Like L-mount for budget, entry level, whatever you want to call it, is a mixed bag. At the very least, consider it. I think L-mount is going to be an amazing solution, amazing option for video people, especially considering Panasonic is in there. And for photography people, Sigma is in there. It does have Samyang now. It's very likely we'll see Samyang autofocus lenses. At the very least, you can find something maybe $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 to have a decentish kit. Anyways, hope you enjoyed this video. Scott Photography Bonsai. Thanks.